three more points. One is related to what Amos Hochstein said about the projections over the summer by investment banks that were totally different. I'll read half a sentence from Citibank. It says,
they're the exception.
No, I'm carrying on your point. Projecting crude oil prices is in many respects a fool's errand. They wrote that at the end of November in a piece called Goodbye Triple-Digit Oil. Then a month earlier, Goldman Sachs wrote the new oil order, and they keep putting the new oil order on all the publications. This is the same investment bank that back in 06 or 05 wrote about the brave new business cycle and that there'll be no more recessions in the world, and these days are over. And then we had the biggest recession since the Great Depression. Now, the more serious point I want to make is that my reading is that we are in a volatile period, at least since 2000, 2001. If that is to stay, then the one sure thing is that there will be no stability in prices. And if we are now at 60-something, it will not stay for too long at 60-something. Unlike the 70s, or relative to the 70s and 80s, we're in a different world in this sense. Not always high, not always low. And that's something, also this volatility needs to be taken into account. Second point related to, Yossi, you mentioned Jerusalem and the price of oil. I once talked with a former Director General of the Ministry of Finance who told me how they decide on taxes in Israel. So they have a deficit, and there is public pressure to cut the deficit. There are not enough revenues. So they say, oh, let's think of the easy things. Well, there are two goods that are also actually bad in terms of the environment, and that is cigarette smoking and oil. So let's tax both, first of all, because it's easy. Second, because we can justify it by claiming that we are taxing negative externalities. Surprisingly, that's how tax policy works in Israel. And also about that, there is a more serious point. There is a long debate, an ongoing debate in the US about energy policy and about taxation. And maybe times of lower oil prices are actually times to increase taxes, although it's politically extremely difficult. But there is a president now who's not going to be re-elected again and will re-establish relations with Cuba because he doesn't need all sorts of popular support. And this president can do more on energy policy by taxing something which some economists have been advocating for years. That's just an idea. Last thing.
Well, and many countries are doing that, rolling back fossil fuel subsidies, taking advantage of a low gasoline price like India and others.
Which should be the case, I think. Last point related to what Oded said, Iran, and if I mention Russia, and the fiscal issue. There are estimates by these same Goldman Sachs economists that Iran needs oil prices basically to double from current levels, and Russia needs 70% higher oil prices to attain fiscal sustainability. If oil prices remain below these levels, the debt to GDP ratio of these countries will blow. That is, they'll be on an unsustainable course. So one strategic issue is that these two economies, and probably a few more, but these are key economies, Iran and Russia, are suffering now important losses of income. And I think Oded wanted to make the point that these are strategic, big changes happening, obviously subject to the caveat how long this will still go on.
Thank you, Eran. Quick comments before we close down. Amos.
Well, first I'll...
We can do that. Quick one. Okay. Not statement, question.
Short statement and a
No,
question.
no.
You knew the guy.
Amos, what's your reaction to the argument that the U.S. in the long run will lower its since these days, much of the oil from the Persian Gulf is directed to China, and the American taxpayers will not like to see much of its tax payment going to secure oil flow to China, possibly India, and other markets.
Quickly before I close, yes, Eddie.
For Yossi, you mentioned price floors on the S-curves with the price floors, the export deals. Are there price floors on all of the export deals and LOIs for Tamao and the Vietnam? And approximately what are they? I understand the price floor is approximately $6.50 for 1,000 cubic feet for the Dead Sea Industries deal, and is that comparable in the other export deals?
Okay, Jason, go first.
But well, the questions were directed at other people. What do you mean?
No, because this is your last opportunity to use the microphone.
Okay, but do we want...
Right.
Your last comment.
You're not,
I'm confused about whether people are answering the questions that were asked. Are we...
Sure, I'll answer the question that was asked. No.
Well, and part of the reason... There are a bunch of reasons the
Yes,
answer
be
is...
short. I was short.
There are a bunch of reasons the answer is no. One of them is that U.S. imports of oil from the Persian Gulf haven't actually fallen very much.
Look,
But even if they had it, really...
the
wouldn't
covenant,
matter,
this supposed secret covenant between the United States and the Gulf, where we supply security and they supply energy products, was never accurate and is inaccurate today, and therefore the drawing any consequences of a change to that covenant that never existed doesn't give you real consequences.
I'll put in a plug for the Center on Global Energy Policy. When we launched in April of last year, then National Security Advisor Tom Donilon gave probably one of the better speeches that's been given to date on laying out how the U.S. views the national security impacts of an oil boom, and made very clear why the U.S. would remain engaged in the Middle East. Because oil is priced in a global market, because there's lots of security interest in the Middle East aside from oil, and a host of others.
Let me just, if that's the last final, just to, I'll make sure the president knows that you think he should raise a lot of taxes. But in our system, he also has a Congress to deal with, and I don't know if you saw the last election. Didn't go so well for us. And they may have a thing or two to say about new taxes on energy at the moment. Just to comment on the Iran piece, look, and on the regional. First, I don't want to draw the wrong conclusions. Iran has a lot to gain from signing a deal. Most of all is to start a very long way back that they have to claw back on to joining family of nations. And that's what we think is the main objective for them, is to change course, change path. It's not about oil. The benefit, obviously, of starting to sell oil, regardless of prices, you could to actually repatriate the money, which, therefore, the idea of budgeting of what it would take for Iran is kind of a, I know people discuss it, but it's not real because the money is still in banks in other countries and they cannot be repatriated. On the regional, I don't want, Oded, for you to take the wrong conclusion from what I said before. I think Leviathan has, even in the current price structure, has great feasibility for success and is the best option that Israel has. And the fact that prices fall doesn't, it's about supply and demand at the end of the day. The region that Israel is in is somewhat immune to the price fall because there is a demand shortage. So Egypt's demand far eclipses its supply for the first time. This is one of the largest exporters of natural gas in the past. They need gas. Jordan needs gas. Turkey needs gas. So there is a unique moment here that can be taken care of. What I was trying to suggest earlier is that it's now, because Egypt needs gas now. And if Israel can't get its regulatory story together and to allow for Noble and Delek to sanction the project, then what's going to happen is Egypt's going to start making decisions. And that's already happening. The contract signed with Hoga, the Norwegian company, for a floating LNG is because they need to get the gas for this summer. And once you make a investment in infrastructure, you don't move back. Jordan, I think it makes sense to have the contracts that have been signed and that could be signed in the future. But for that, you have to get something going. Otherwise, they're also looking at an LNG from a different company in Aqaba. So at some point, you can discuss these things for a very long time. But at some point, if decisions aren't made,
explain to me
it goes
this
away.
point. LNG exporting Jordanian consumption?
Sure. Why not?
How much is an energy?
They will do that anyhow.
It's much more expensive for two reasons. You need resilience and redundancy in the system, and you got to make sure that you have the supply. And our advice to Jordan, when I first approached Jordan on this issue, has always been not to replace all your eggs in the same basket, Egypt, with all your eggs in any basket. Have diversification, and that's whether it's from Iraq, if the Anbar province issues are resolved, if it's from Saudi Arabia, if it's from Egypt, if it's from Israel. So there has to be. But the point that I'm trying to make is Israel actually has a unique, great opportunity, and I think there's a lot of really good work that's being done. It's just that options don't remain open in the markets, and even with oil price declines and gas price declines, and as Yossi said, there is the complexity of budgeting for and contracting in the oil business is far greater than any other industry I'm aware of. I mean, there's a reason why these negotiations go on forever, and why so many lawyers make so much money on them. It's because you have to hedge against every single scenario and risk, and you gotta mitigate those risks. And it's not only on what's there; it's the financing. The difference of when they talk about discounts in the oil markets, if you give not a 30-day prepayment but a 90-day post-payment, you just change the entire price of oil without still charging the same money for the barrel. So there's a lot of different ways to calculate these things. And I don't think that the decline in price is going to have an impact here. What will make an impact here is how quickly you can get Leviathan sanctioned and how quickly you can send a message out for international companies to come invest here. My only disagreement with Yossi is I think I would be wary of a bid round without some certainty, some of these questions being resolved. So when you say doing it today, I think that if Leviathan is sanctioned, it will send a very different message to the international oil community of what the investment here looks like.
Thank you for clarifying that. You're totally right. You know, before a bid, you need to put in place a very, very clear kind of regulatory environment to the investors, and this is clear. And I totally agree. Leviathan sanction will help a lot to bring here international companies. I will answer the last question that I was asked. I will not, get into the numbers, but every contract that we have a floor price. So everyone is a curve kind of.
Thank you very much to the panelists. Last word for the organizers, please. David.
כל כך מעניין, כל כך חשוב. תודה רבה. Thank you all for coming. Really wonderful.